I cheered when they pulled my son's body from the lake. The sound ripped out of me before I could stop it. A raw, triumphant cheer that made every person on that muddy shore turn and stare. Detective Thaddeus Marlowe dropped his radio. My sister Thessaly grabbed my arm so hard it bruised, hissing, "What is wrong with you?" The divers were still in the water, carefully maneuvering the black body bag toward the bank, and there I stood with my fists raised above my head, tears streaming down my face, making sounds that looked like celebration. Someone behind me whispered, "She's lost her mind." Another voice said, "That's disgusting." A uniformed officer started toward me like I was having a breakdown that needed controlling. But I wasn't breaking down. After 247 days of being called hysterical, after 8 months of being told I was imagining things, after countless nights of being made to feel crazy for insisting my son didn't run away, they'd finally found him. Calloway's body in that lake meant I wasn't losing my mind. It meant everything I'd been screaming about since October was true. It meant Detective Marlowe, standing 15 feet away with horror spreading across his face, had been lying to me from the very beginning. And it meant the evidence I'd found in his office 3 days ago, the evidence he'd tried to have me arrested for discovering, was about to destroy him. Calloway disappeared on a Wednesday. He was 16, didn't have a car, didn't have his license yet. He came home from school at 3:30, ate half a sandwich, told me he was going to Dashiell's house to work on a history project, and kissed my forehead before walking out at 4:15. When he wasn't home by 9 I called Dashiell's mom. Calloway never showed up. I called his friends. Nobody had seen him. At 10:30, I called the police. The dispatcher told me teenagers stay out late all the time, that I should wait 24 hours before panicking. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with every light on, phone in my hand, waiting for him to walk through the door with some reasonable explanation. He never did. Deputy Huxley came the next morning with a notebook and barely concealed impatience. Had Calloway been depressed? Was he struggling in school? Had we been fighting? Were there problems at home? I said no to everything. Calloway was happy, excited about trying out for the spring musical, wanted to go shopping for new sneakers on Saturday. None of that sounded like a kid planning to disappear. Huxley wrote it all down with this patient expression that said he thought Calloway would show up embarrassed in a few days. 3 days became a week. The police called a few friends, checked his social media, talked to his teachers, going through motions, waiting for him to come home so they could close the case. I made 500 flyers and plastered them everywhere, organized search parties with neighbors. The police said I was wasting time, that statistically most missing teenagers were runaways who returned within 2 weeks. Day 10, Detective Marlowe took over. 22-year veteran, impressive solve rate, specialist in missing persons. He sat across from me in an interview room and told me with absolute certainty that Calloway ran away after a fight with me that I was too traumatized to remember. When I said there was no fight, he smiled like I was a confused child, said parents often block out confrontations as a defense mechanism, that once I accepted what really happened, we could work together to bring Calloway home. I asked what evidence he had that Calloway ran away. He said the evidence was that Calloway was missing with no sign of foul play. I asked what signs they'd actually looked for. He said they'd conducted a thorough investigation, suggested I consider therapy to process my guilt and anxiety. I started documenting everything they weren't doing, every unreturned call, every ignored lead, every dismissal. My sister Thessaly thought I was obsessing, that I should trust the professionals. But something was wrong with how they were handling this. Day 30, I hired private investigator Corbin Ashworth. Cost me $5,000 I didn't have. He reviewed everything and came back with a list of failures. They never checked traffic cameras near our house, never interviewed bus drivers, never requested school security footage. Corbin did it all himself. Found Calloway on school cameras leaving at 3:47, walking toward the parking lot where the camera was conveniently broken. Tracked him to a gas station 2 blocks away. Timestamp 4:03, Calloway walking north on Maple Street, alone, looking at his phone. Corbin traced that route. 4 blocks north, Maple Street dead-ended at an industrial area with warehouses and a truck rental facility. He showed Calloway's photo to every employee. A woman named Winslow at the rental place recognized him immediately, said she'd seen a teenage boy in their parking lot around 4:15 that afternoon, talking to a man near a dark blue pickup truck. She remembered because it was her daughter's birthday and she'd left work early. The man was tall, 40s or 50s, baseball cap and jacket. She didn't see his face clearly. The truck was new-looking with some kind of sticker on the back window. Then she said something that made my blood stop. Nobody from the police ever came to ask her anything. Detective Marlowe told me they'd canvassed everyone in a 2-mile radius. I called Marlowe immediately, asked if he'd interviewed anyone at the truck rental facility on Maple Street. He said he'd need to check his notes. I told him about Winslow, the truck, the man in the baseball cap. Long silence. Then he said Corbin was filling my head with theories that weren't based in evidence. I asked how a witness account wasn't evidence. He said one vague memory from 6 weeks ago wasn't enough, especially when there was no proof Calloway didn't walk away from that truck voluntarily. His excuses sounded rehearsed. I asked if he was even trying to find my son. He said I was emotional, that I needed to let them do their job, that maybe Calloway got into that truck willingly, that maybe he knew the man, that maybe he'd planned to leave. Corbin started digging into Marlowe's background. What he found made my stomach turn. Marlowe had handled 11 missing teenager cases in 5 years. 9 were classified as runaways within the first month. None of those 9 were ever found. The other 2 were discovered dead in distant locations, both ruled accidental. Corbin said it was statistically impossible for one detective to have that many missing persons with 0 recoveries. It looked like Marlowe was either catastrophically incompetent or deliberately mishandling cases. Day 90, I got an anonymous call. Male voice, muffled like someone was covering the phone. He said if I wanted to find Calloway, I should look into Merrick Voss, then hung up. Corbin ran the name through every database. Merrick Voss, 53, long-haul truck driver with a route through our town once weekly. Arrested twice for solicitation, once for possession of illegal materials involving minors. Both cases dropped due to lack of evidence. He drove a dark blue Chevrolet Silverado. The DMV photo showed a sticker on the back window, "Keep on truckin'." This man had been near Calloway, and police never found the connection. We drove to Voss's trailer park 30 miles outside town. The manager said nobody from the police had come asking questions. We waited 3 hours. Voss didn't show. Corbin said we had to tell police or risk contaminating evidence. At the station, we laid everything out for Marlowe. The witness, the truck, Voss's criminal history, his address. Marlowe listened with crossed arms. When Corbin finished, Marlowe called it circumstantial. Dropped charges meant Voss was innocent until proven guilty. The anonymous tip could be misdirection. He'd look into it, but I shouldn't get my hopes up. I asked why he'd never canvassed the truck rental facility, why Winslow was never interviewed, why it took a private investigator 60 days to find information that should have been discovered in week 1. Marlowe looked at me with pity and said investigations were complicated, that Corbin's job was selling hope, that I needed to prepare for Calloway never coming home. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about how Marlowe dismissed everything felt wrong. Not just incompetent wrong, but deliberately wrong. Corbin had the same feeling. He said Marlowe's reaction wasn't normal for a detective being handed a legitimate lead. It was the reaction of someone trying to kill an investigation. We started looking at Marlowe differently, not as a bad detective, but as someone who might have reasons to make cases disappear. Corbin requested Marlowe's case files through public records. The department denied it, claiming active investigations were exempt. While we waited for the appeal, I started following Marlowe. Not close enough to be noticed, but close enough to document his patterns, where he went after work, who he met with. Day 134, I followed Marlowe to a diner 20 miles outside town. He sat in a back booth with a man I didn't recognize. They talked for 30 minutes. When the man stood to leave, I saw his face clearly. Tall, baseball cap, blue jacket. I took photos through the window. After he left, I went inside and asked the waitress if she knew him. She said he was a regular, came in every week, always Thursdays, drove a truck. I showed her Calloway's photo, asked if she'd ever seen him with this man. She looked uncomfortable, said she minded her own business, and I should too, but her eyes said yes. I sent the photos to Corbin. Facial recognition came back in an hour. Merrick Voss, the same man from the anonymous tip, the same man Winslow saw with Calloway. Detective Marlowe was having regular meetings with a suspected child predator, and he'd never mentioned knowing him when we brought up Voss's name. Corbin said this was bigger than incompetence. This was conspiracy. We needed federal involvement. The FBI investigates police corruption. Day 156, I got another anonymous call. Same muffled voice. He said if I wanted proof of what Marlowe was doing, I should check his office at the police station late Thursday night. Marlowe always left around 11:30. His office door didn't lock properly if you pushed hard on the frame while turning the handle. The file cabinet had a spare key taped under the bottom drawer. I asked who he was. He hung up. Corbin said it was obviously a trap, that someone was trying to get me arrested for breaking in. But what if someone inside the department knew what Marlowe was doing and couldn't come forward? What if this was my only chance to get evidence? Thursday night, I waited across from the police station, watched Marlowe leave at 11:33, exactly like the caller said. At 11:47, I walked through the front door like I belonged there. The night receptionist barely looked up. I went straight to Marlowe's office. The door opened exactly how the caller described. My heart hammered as I searched for the file cabinet key, found it taped under the bottom drawer. Inside were folders labeled Closed, Runaway Cases, 9 files, all teenagers, all classified as runaways within 30 days, all assigned to Marlowe, all with bank deposit slips clipped to them showing payments from Merrick Voss, payments ranging from $15,000 to $30,000. I started photographing everything with my phone. That's when I heard footsteps in the hallway, heavy boots, keys jingling. I'd been in his office 17 minutes. Marlowe wasn't supposed to be back. The footsteps stopped outside his door. I watched the handle turn, still holding the file folder, still holding my phone, and Marlowe walked in. His face went from confusion to understanding to rage in seconds. He said, "What the hell was I doing in his office?" His hand moved to his gun. I held up my phone and said I'd already sent everything to the FBI. That agent Isolde Brennan had copies of all his bank records, all the case files, everything. It was a lie, but he didn't know that. His hand froze on his weapon. Marlowe told me to put down the phone, that I was making a huge mistake, that I didn't understand what I was looking at. I asked him to explain $200,000 in payments from Merrick Voss. Explain why every teenager who went missing on Voss's truck route got assigned to him and classified as a runaway. Explain why he never investigated any of them. He said I had no idea what I'd gotten myself into, that I needed to forget what I saw and walk away before people got hurt. I asked if that was a threat. He said it was advice. Then he pulled out his phone and called for backup. Said he'd found an intruder in his office. 2 officers arrived in under a minute. Marlowe told them to arrest me. I held up my phone again and said everything was being live-streamed to my lawyer and the FBI. Another lie, but I was committed. I said if they arrested me, they'd be part of whatever Marlowe was covering up. The officers looked at each other, uncertain. Marlowe told them I was lying. I started reading off details from the files, names of missing teenagers, dates they disappeared, amounts Voss paid after each case closed. One officer, younger guy named Lysander, looked at Marlowe and asked if that was true. Marlowe said it was fabricated evidence. I showed them photos on my phone, the bank slips, the case files, the pattern going back 5 years. Officer Lysander said they needed to call Internal Affairs. Marlowe said Lysander was way out of line, but Lysander was already on his radio calling for a supervisor. Marlowe's face went dark red. He told me I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life, that I had no idea who I was dealing with. I told him I knew exactly who I was dealing with. A cop who sold missing children to a trafficker and covered it up by classifying them as runaways. A detective who took money to make sure no one looked too hard. A man who was going to prison. The supervisor who arrived was Lieutenant Octavia Reeves. She took one look at the scene and immediately separated us, escorted me to a conference room and asked me to explain exactly what happened. I showed her everything on my phone, every photo I'd taken, the pattern I'd discovered, the connection between Marlowe and Voss. She listened without interrupting, her expression getting harder. When I finished, she said she was placing Marlowe on administrative leave and calling the FBI. She asked if I had other copies. I lied and said yes, that my lawyer had everything. She said that was smart. Then she asked why I broke into a police office. I told her about the anonymous call, about being desperate after 8 months of being ignored, about knowing something was wrong and having nowhere else to turn. Reeves called the FBI at 1:30 in the morning. Agent Isolde Brennan arrived at 3:45 with 2 other agents. They interviewed me for 4 hours straight, asked me to go through everything from the beginning, Calloway's disappearance, the failed investigation, Corbin's discoveries, the anonymous tips, following Marlowe, breaking into his office, finding the files. Brennan said they'd been building a case against Merrick Voss for 3 months based on testimony from a boy who'd escaped. They'd identified Voss as a trafficker but didn't know he had help from law enforcement. What I found changed everything. They needed to move fast before Marlowe or Voss disappeared. At 6 a.m., FBI agents arrested Merrick Voss at a truck stop in Tennessee. At the same time, they arrested Detective Marlowe at the police station, both charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, human trafficking, and obstruction of justice. Additional charges would follow. Brennan said they were searching Voss's truck, his trailer, his storage units, looking for evidence, looking for the missing teenagers, looking for Calloway. She said I should go home and wait, but I couldn't. I needed to know. Brennan finally agreed I could wait at the FBI field office. I sat in a conference room for 11 hours while they processed evidence. At 6:15 p.m., Brennan came back with a different expression. She said they'd received an anonymous tip about Prescott Reservoir, saying they should check the North Bank for remains. Divers were already on site. They'd found something. She asked if I wanted to be there. I said yes before she finished asking. My sister Thessaly met me there. The lake was 40 miles from town, surrounded by woods. Police and FBI vehicles ringed the shore. Marlo was there too, in the back of a cruiser, hands cuffed, watching everything unfold. The divers brought up the first body bag at 7:30, then another, 4 total by the time they finished. Brennan came over and said they'd need dental records for identification, but based on clothing and personal effects, one was Calloway. The other 3 were teenagers from Marlo's closed cases, all murdered, all dumped when they became too difficult for Voss to control or threatened to expose the operation. That's when it happened. The sound that ripped out of me, not grief, but vindication, a cheer so raw and unexpected that everyone stopped and stared. My sister grabbed my arm, horrified. Someone said I was sick. Another said I'd lost my mind, but they didn't understand. After 247 days of being called hysterical and paranoid, after being told I didn't understand how investigations worked, after being gaslit and dismissed and patronized by the very man now handcuffed 15 feet away, I finally had proof. Proof I'd been right about everything. And proof that Detective Thaddeus Marlo had spent 8 months lying to my face while my son's body was rotting in this lake. The trials took 14 months. Voss went first. 4 escaped victims testified. Phone records showed communication with buyers in 8 states. Financial records documented payments. DNA linked him to his truck and where bodies were found. The jury deliberated 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Life without parole. Marlo's trial was longer. His defense claimed he'd been manipulated, that he thought he was investigating legitimate runaways, that the payments were for unrelated work. The prosecution destroyed him, showed the pattern of buried cases, the witness statements never followed up on, the evidence never collected, bank records showing $200,000 over 4 years. Officer Lysander testified about how Marlo tried to have me arrested when I found the files. The jury found him guilty of conspiracy, obstruction, and accessory to murder. 45 years in federal prison. 7 families sued the police department. We refused to settle. Wanted public documentation of every failure. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Our lawyers proved systematic negligence in how the department handled missing persons. Proved supervisors ignored red flags with Marlo because his arrest numbers looked good. Proved there were no oversight mechanisms. The jury awarded us $43 million combined. The police chief resigned. The mayor ordered complete overhaul of protocols. I testified before the state legislature supporting a bill requiring independent oversight of police investigations involving missing children. If a case remained unsolved after 30 days, an outside agency would review procedures. Body cameras required during family interactions. A database tracking how officers handled missing person cases so patterns like Marlo's could be identified earlier. Law enforcement opposed it. I told them officer discretion got my son killed. The bill passed. The governor signed it. Calloway's law. 3 years later, Brennan called. They'd identified 2 more victims killed by Voss. Both families contacted me, wanting to thank me for pushing the investigation that exposed him. They'd been dismissed by police, told their sons ran away, spent years wondering. Both said finding their sons' bodies brought the same complicated relief, the bittersweet closure of finally knowing truth. I cheered when they pulled my son's body from the lake, because his death proved what everyone tried to make me doubt, that I knew my child, that a mother's instinct isn't hysteria. Calloway's body meant Marlo couldn't hide anymore. Voss couldn't keep hunting. 8 months of gaslighting ended and truth began. I wish Calloway had come home alive, but in that moment on Prescott Reservoir's shore, watching them pull my son from dark water, vindication flooded through me because finally someone would have to listen. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.